Hi, everyone. We're just waiting a minute for a chair, but to remind you to mute your microphones.
Yeah, greetings, everyone, from the bowels of the Capitol. I feel like I am undercover right now because Mayor Ramsey, Councilmember Mendenhall, and I will be presenting an award to Governor Herbert at the end of LPC. It was going to be at the beginning of LPC, but he is currently on a call with Vice President Mike Pence about the current ongoing deliberations about a potential fourth stimulus and vaccine distribution. As a result, we have been bumped. This is the first time in my career, though, that I've been bumped by the Vice President of the United States. So I think that's kind of cool, all things considered. But nevertheless, we're here in the Capitol, and Victoria and Mayor Ramsey is trying to find me. So I'm going to step away from the computer to let her in. So I'll let you go ahead and start welcoming people. And as soon as you see her, she can conduct.
Okay, sounds great. As Cam mentioned, we sent out a revised agenda mid-morning this morning to accommodate the governor's schedule. So he will be with us at the end of the meeting, and we hope you will all stay. He'll be able to see you, you'll be able to see him, and we just want to recognize him for his years of service on behalf of the state and of cities, especially since he's had a long tenure, and this is an odd way to send him out virtually. So if you could stay at the end of the meeting, we would really appreciate that. So give Cam just a second to see if he can help Mayor Ramsey get in. Otherwise, we've asked Councilmember Carrie Malkovich to be our backup chair today, so we may have to call on you. We appreciate her willing to do that. They navigate the Capitol. Well, I don't see Cam coming back, so I think he's still trying to help Mayor Ramsey. Councilmember Malkovich, as our deputized chair, maybe you could get us started and call for an approval of last meeting's minutes.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone on the call today. It's a crazy time, but I'm glad that you're all able to join us today. Again, my name is Carrie Malkovich. I am a council member with the City of Woodland Hills and a member of the League Board. Stepping in for a moment for Mayor Ramsey. We'd like to call for a approval of the November 16th, 2020 minutes. Do I have anyone to make that motion?
And just a reminder, you can put your motions in the chat box. Please use the chat box, not the Q&A.
All right, Rod seconded. Who for? Oh, so moved. Katie. Thanks, Katie and Rod. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, then we'll call for the vote. All in favor? Do we just have them raise their hand? Is that what we're doing, Victoria? Or put
You can put it in the chat.
Okay,
and
put your vote in the chat. All right.
All right.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to number 2 on our agenda, the legislative outlook, legislative logistics. Victoria, would you like to take that?
I would. Thank you so much. All right, Carson, if you'd proceed to the next slide. We want to go over what we're hearing session will be like this year virtually. We're still waiting for confirmation on details, and we're hoping to have those by the end of this week. But our main message here is we are really going to need everyone's help. We keep saying this, and we're going to keep saying it because with this virtual advocacy, those personal connections, and your help in the League Army is really going to be important this year. So Carson, if you would go to the next slide. just as a reminder, when we do advocate, this is our policy prism. We look at each bill that comes from the legislature to ask whether it respects the traditional role of local government. Is it a one-size-fits-all approach, or does it respect the unique circumstances of your city? And will it result in an unfunded mandate? And as always, we have our policy pillars to respect each other's roles, the state and local role, collaborate with each other, and look for good outcomes. All right, Carson, if you would go to the next slide. All right. This is our policy tiers. We've been putting this up at each meeting. And as you can see, we've made some changes. In Tier 2, we've moved a lot of the land use task force items to Tier 3 because consensus has been reached on many of those, although gravel pit still remains on there. And so we just want you to see these. These determine how you all CT staff will engage with the legislature. Tier 1 being all hands on deck. Tier 2 being some involvement, some advocacy, but we won't pull out all the political stops. And Tier 3, we will make our members informed mostly through our bill tracking process, but we won't necessarily call out the Army on those issues. If you have any questions about any of these, you are welcome to reach out. All right, Carson, if you go to the next staff. All right, fish and logistics. As I mentioned, we are going to be advocating differently this year, thanks to the pandemic circumstances we're in and closures at the Capitol. So Carson, if you go along, we will be doing session mostly virtually, and LPC will be all virtual. So this is what we think we know. Again, we're waiting for confirmation on some of these things, but we know that legislators are encouraged to meet with their constituents remotely. We've heard that they will be setting up public work pods in the rotunda so that the public can communicate remotely with legislators or listen to committees. But I'm assuming those will also be socially distanced from each other. There will be limited audience in committee meetings, and the public is strongly encouraged to participate via WebEx. So if you've been watching the interim committees, we're expecting those committees to run during session very similarly, and there will be limited number of seats in committee rooms. So we're going to have to try and figure out how to navigate that. Legislators are going to be urged to not attend after-hour events, and we're still waiting to hear if there will be COVID testing, but our understanding is that masks will be mandatory up on the Capitol. LPC, as I mentioned, will be virtual, so we'll be holding it like this. We're currently working on a voting system to ensure that we get the right feedback from you as far as position on bills, and to also help facilitate discussion at these meetings. Local Officials Day, which is always a big day of advocacy for us up on the Hill, is canceled. They were not allowing any groups to hold special events like Local Officials Day, but we will be sponsoring a lunch for our legislators and giving them our legislative guide. And the League Army is crucial because of this. So we need you to reach out to your legislators and get to know them, and also help us reach out to them when we have big bills coming up. All right, Carson, if you would go to the next slide. So we are asking, as part of this virtual advocacy, that you will reach out to your legislator and find their preferred venue of communication, whether they want to be contacted by text, if they want email, if they want phone calls, or some of them rely on their interns heavily. Then we would appreciate if you would also share that information with us. And then next month, we will have software for our members to sign up to get text alerts. And we promise we will be very careful with your phone numbers, so we won't disseminate them out to the world, and then we will use them judiciously, so that we really want these text alerts to go out on hot bills, so that you then know that something's happening on the bill and can then immediately reach out to your legislator to let them know how you feel about that legislation. All right, next we will go to housing. And I'd like to welcome, I see Mayor Ramsey there, and appreciate her being here. So Mayor Ramsey, just so you know, we are now on the housing part of the agenda.
Yes, I
All right,
appreciate it.
Carson.
Thank you.
All right. Carson, if you could go to the next slide. Okay, great. Carson, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Victoria. Sorry about the slide lag, everybody. It seems to be having a little bit of a delayed effect. So there's a couple bills we've heard about. I'll go a little bit more into the Commission on Housing Affordability in a moment, but here's where we're standing in the broader sense. We've heard that there will be another version of House Bill 374. This is the bill that you've all spent a lot of time reporting to us, and we really appreciate that. This bill will go back to the original version of House Bill 374, which we expect will have some restriction on your plan review authority and give private sector options for mandatory private sector options for building inspections if there's a certain time limit. We don't know the exact details, but we've heard this, and we'll go into a little bit more later. We've heard there'll be legislation on development fees. It's unclear whether those will be emerging from the Commission on Housing Affordability, but it's very likely that they'll be run separate. There's also been rumors of bills trying to allow inclusionary zoning, both inside and outside of the Commission on Housing Affordability context. And the Commission on Housing Affordability has also looked at the public asset management, and I'll dive into that. So as I mentioned, a lot of these are kind of closely related with the CHA. Last week, there was supposedly going to be a bill presented, but it sounded like it was not quite there yet. So there was no bill. Instead, the conversation just kind of focused on a summary of different options. They're really looking for a bill that has consensus and quote unquote the low-hanging fruit, something that's effective and something where that aligns with the new administration's emphasis. There has been some discussion that since Amendment G passed and the state has a little bit more general fund flexibility than in prior years, there might be some more general fund dollars available for the state to contribute towards either housing or housing affordability. Paul Larson, I just saw your question. The CHA is the Commission on Housing Affordability. I think my screen skipped twice. It's not. So again, all these, there's a whole lot up in the air right now, and I wish we had a little bit more cohesive idea of what exactly was going to happen, but there's a lot of different options as we've discussed, and we're still kind of waiting for more legislation to come out. Up here, I kind of put a summary of all the different possibilities, and you can kind of look at these through the lenses I just discussed, what's politically viable, where there might be consensus. I don't think the commission wants to have a controversial bill. I think they'd like to see something that can actually make it through with a lot of support. And as you can guess, as we've discussed, some of these items are more controversial than others. The land use subgroup was looking at some controversial issues, including permit fee nexus and inclusionary zoning with some design standard ties. That there's not been any updates there, but my understanding is that group's going to try to reconvene to take a vote and then send a vote to the whole group. We shall see when that manifests. The housing reinvestment zones have not made a lot of progress since the last meeting. Senator Anderegg expressed concerns that maybe it might not be quite all the way there yet, and there may be more discussions. There has been a lot of conversations, though, around these, this either a housing inventory or public asset inventory, all these sort of tools to try to inform planners and help planners understand a regional perspective. Those come with their own concerns, but we've been working closely with WFRC as well as members on the commission to try to figure out how those could be a productive tool for cities without either imposing costly requirements or infringing on traditional roles. And then the rural group has not met since the commission met, and there's still not a lot of definition on what would qualify as rural for these pre-development grants, but we'll keep an eye on it. I suspect that we'll have some consensus, and that will probably make it into the Commission on Housing Affordability bill. There has been some success on the landlord-tenant mediation side. That's, again, not related directly to cities, but a number of cities have expressed interest. The most recent information was a new idea that was proposed in this last meeting, and that is some connection to GoEd's EdTIF. That's their economic development incentive tool. And whether that's a piece of SB 34 or whether that's some additional requirement that companies would have money set aside for housing is still sort of unclear, but we're looking to continue those discussions. Are there any questions about this before we move on to the other housing pieces? Not seeing any questions. I'd like to pose a quick poll. We used these last time, as some of you will remember. And let's see. We're going to try one again really quick. We'd like to get a sense of, we've discussed this idea of having a nexus between your actual costs for your planning departments and your building inspections, and then the fees for plan review. And we'd like to get a sense. We've heard generally that there's concerns about that approach. We're just going to do a quick kind of trial poll to see where everybody's at on that issue. Let's see if everybody can see that. I'll just leave it up for a few minutes. Again, we've not had a lot of clarity on what exactly this looks like, but we'd like to just get a sense of how strongly you feel about it. I'll leave it open for just another 15 seconds or so.
And Carson, I just wanted to reiterate what you were saying, is that as we do these polls, because these bills are not numbered yet, these are not to help us take an official position yet. They're just, and we know we would like more detail, but they are helpful to us to know as we get into session where our members are at on these issues.
All right, and then if everybody has voted, it looks like about 64% of you have voted. So I'll go ahead and end the poll. It looks like there's actually a plurality of support for this concept, with about 11% increase over those who oppose it. So this is helpful feedback, and let me see if I can share it. So this is helpful feedback, and again, not a specific position, but helps us kind of understand where the LPC is at on these issues. And then I will turn it over to Victoria for the next piece.
All right, thanks, Carson. This was in the supplemental materials that went out. This is a statement by Representative Ray, who is also member of the Home Builders Association. So this was sent out in their newsletter last month. And if you'd like to read it, I'll put it on the screen, but it's also in the materials. And basically, Representative Ray, he ran HB 374 last year, which started out as a bill that would allow third parties to do plan reviews and inspections. We were able to negotiate with him to change that to a report, which many of you helped us collect that data as to whether or not your cities were meeting the plan review timelines and inspection timelines. But despite the fact that for residential plan reviews, 93% of our reporting cities were meeting those deadlines, Representative Ray is still talking about running legislation. And the two parts of that are to, one, to allow developers either inspect themselves or review themselves, plan reviews and inspections, or hire third parties. And then the other side of that is to prohibit cities from setting certain design elements on residential units. And as you can see from his statement, he feels that local officials are getting in the way of affordable housing, and they're doing it through these mechanisms, and that he strongly feels like that needs to be changed. And so we are expecting legislation from him during session to address these two issues. And we've got a poll on the second part of that. Carson, if you would put that up on the design elements. We've heard from some of you on, we've asked before on the plan review and inspections, but we would like to know how you feel about the residential design, and if you feel strongly or not strongly about legislation that would curb a city's authority to set those standards. So if you just take a second to fill that out. So it looks like Zach has asked, the term redefined is too vague. And yes, since we don't have the legislation, we're not exactly sure what he would do, but our assumption is that he will stop cities from being able to set things like, in this particular message, he said roof pitch, I think external materials, color of doors is something else he mentioned. So in kind of a broad context, that's what Representative Ray is thinking. All right, so this is helpful. Looks like the majority of our members either oppose or strongly oppose. And so as we wait to see that legislation come out, we can take that back to Representative Ray and talk to our legislators about that as we proceed in session. So thank you, everyone. All right, Carson, if you'd go on to the next. So as we continue to see these bills pop up on housing, we want you to know that we are already trying to get the message out. We had a great editorial board from our officers with the Deseret News, which resulted in an article that's in your packet, and the headline is here, really trying to help legislators and the public understand cities' role in planning and growth and housing. And it was a really great discussion with the Deseret News editorial board, and we also met with the Salt Lake Tribune editorial board. We also put together the report on HB 374, which is in your packet materials and has some great talking points that you can take back to your legislators about how cities are meeting these plan review deadlines and inspection deadlines. And then we are working currently now on our policy guide for this year, and we hope to have that out soon. And our main focus in that policy guide are two parts. One is cities' roles and challenges in growth, and the other part is public safety. And we'll have some great talking points in that guide for you as well that you can use to take back to your legislator. So we are working diligently to get this message across, because we feel like it's kind of been one-sided in the papers lately and at the legislature, and they need to better understand the tools that cities have and the challenges that we also have in growth. All right, Carson, if you would go on to the next slide. And these are data points that we had in our last LPC, and there'll be points that we have in our policy guide too, but we want to just get those out in front of you again. The incredible number of residential permits that are being approved this year, we're probably going to hit record numbers again. And that our own studies show that residents of the state trust their local city or town government more than the legislature or the governor necessarily to tackle growth issues and planning issues. And so feel free to take these talking points back with you when you talk to your legislators, and we feel like if you have these kind of data points with you, they can understand the challenges better and also their own expressions of their constituents. All right, Carson, if you go to the next. I'll turn back to Carson to talk SB 34.
Thanks, Victoria. As many of you know, the Senate Bill 34 reports, this is the progress report on your first year of your implementation of your moderate income housing plan. Those reports were due at the beginning of the month. Right now, we've had more than 63 cities submit their reports. I use the number 63 because that's the last recorded number I have, but we've heard from a number of you who have are either in the process or we heard had submitted their report. So we're expecting that number to increase a little bit, but it is really essential that we get to that 82 out of 82 number. It was really helpful this past session to be able to say that all cities had adopted their moderate income housing plans and they were compliant with the first phase. As we're continuing on these housing discussions, it's critical that we're able to show that cities are participating in the process, and it's really important to be able to share your data and say that and help the state understand that you are planning for growth and have that on an official record. If you have any questions about whether you've reported or not, you can contact me. If you have any questions about how to file the report, feel free to contact my colleague Meg Ryan, mryan@ulct.org. Yeah, please reach out to us with questions. David Fields at Department of Workforce Services has been collaborating with us, so we're hoping to be able to get all 82 in very quickly.
All right. Next, we have Representative Ward here. And Carson, if you could just try to make sure that he is able to join us panelist. And while you do that, if you go to the next slide, we're making Carson be our multi-tool today. If you could just go on the next slide, and I'll quickly go over his bill while you check to see if he can join us. This information was also in your packet of materials. Representative Ward's here to get feedback on his bill, so any concrete information we can give him would be great. He has updated his bill since political subdivisions, and you can see the changes there. But hopefully we're able to get Representative Ward in. So Representative Ward, if you're out there.
Am I in? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you so much for having me today. I just wanted to talk through kind of the basics of what's in my bill. I want to give one little minute of why I feel, kind of my background, my thinking, if you're saying, why is he even doing this? So let me give that first, and then I'll just talk through the main points in the bill. I would say Utah has an affordable housing crisis. It's been getting worse over a 20-year period of time. So whatever we have been doing about affordable housing, I would say, has not been working. Home prices and rent both continue to go up quite a bit faster than median income. And thinking about why this is and what the government can do about it, I would say it's my belief that the relationship between housing supply and housing demand will be a larger factor than any other affordability program that the state could possibly run. If there's adequate supply, prices won't go up that fast. If there's not, that they will. If we think about what supply we have already invested in so far in the state over the last 5-6 decades, it is mostly single family housing units. That's 66% of our total units. So hopefully it seems apparent to me that if we don't use those efficiently, if houses that used to house 8 now only house 2, and the rules are such that they can't make it house 3 or 4 when they want to rent it to someone else, if we can't use that pre-existing stock efficiently, I would say we do not have any hope of an adequate supply. To me, accessory dwelling units are a common sense way to use existing housing stock efficiently, to allow homeowners control over the interior of their own homes. But when we look at what makes that not work, to me, I see just all kinds of little places that crop up and make that not work. And so my bill in general is just to try and simplify each of the places where, to me, it seems like we are actually stopping people from using the interior of their own home that they are living in the most efficient way. So that's kind of the thinking that goes into the bill. So the bill has 5 things that it does. So number one, it makes it so that an internal ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, so interior to the pre-existing home, is considered as a single family dwelling, not as a duplex with respect to building code, except for issues of fire safety. So I've gone through and talked with the fire safety folks and the State Building Commission, and they have agreed that it doesn't make sense that an internal ADU with the owner present does not need to have separate ducting. It doesn't need to have a separate gas line hookup. Issues of fire safety need to be respected no matter what, equal to whether there's an ADU there or not. So the bill will try and make that clear. The second thing the bill will do is it will institute a program to encourage low-cost lending for homeowners who are willing to make an ADU and rent it to someone who is low income, that is less than 80% AMI. The state will provide a backstop on the loan if the bank is unable to collect on it. And in exchange, banks will need to be willing to offer a 15-year fixed low interest rate loan, and then they would receive CRA credit if they made that loan. Right now, there's not very many loans that get made for this, and we hope to jumpstart that so that an owner who needed some financing would be able to find that and at a low interest rate if they were willing to rent to someone who is less than 80% area mean income. The third thing that the bill does is simplify the single family limit law so that we don't exclude renters where some of them are related to each other. So I would say the law as written right now results in some very odd things that we say are illegal. So it's just trying to simplify that. The fourth thing it does is it defines a new kind of an ADU. It was really just the most common kind. It defines an internal ADU. So we're not talking about extra buildings being built on the lot. So this is just basically a remodel interior to the pre-existing home that was already permitted on the lot. And then what the bill does is it says that in zones where ADUs are allowed, where ADUs are permitted, and it's an internal ADU inside a pre-existing home, that municipalities cannot place other restrictions such as lot size, internal size, street frontage, or percentage sizes on internal ADUs. And then the fifth thing it does is it says, it kind of makes a similar rule for HOAs as it does for municipalities. It says if there's a zone where an internal ADU is permitted by the municipality, then a homeowners association cannot make a rule to forbid their members the right to contract inside their home. So it would go to the municipality's rules, zoning, not to the homeowners association. So those are the 5 things that are in that bill. I want to talk 1 quick minute about the single family limit, because I understand that there are some questions about that. And I want to kind of give you, ask this question. Under current Utah law, in a municipality who has a single family limit of 4, which is most of them, which of these are legal combinations that a person could rent some rooms in their home where they own the home? Would it be legal for them to rent to 2 married couples? Would it be legal for them to rent to 3 unrelated adults, one of whom also has a child? Could they rent to 4 unrelated people, but then 2 of them got married? Could they rent to 4 unrelated individuals? Could they rent to an unmarried couple who then has a child? Could they rent to 2 siblings and 1 unrelated friend? Or could they rent to 2 cousins and 2 unrelated friends? And only one of those would be legal. All of those are illegal under our current rule, except right now we require that all 4 individuals are not related to each other. Then it's legal under our law. But if 2 of them are cousins, illegal. 2 of them are siblings, illegal. 1 of them has a child, illegal. 2 married couples, illegal. And so the change in that single family limit just says some of them, they don't have to all be unrelated. Some of them can still be related and be under the limit. So that's what's in the bill. And I will try and answer questions how best I can.
Okay, thank you, Representative. And we'll have a couple poll questions when we're wrapping up on this item, so you can get immediate feedback as far as that goes.
Okay.
So we've got so there's a question where we can find text of the draft of the bill. Those were in the LPC supplemental materials. Carson has also posted that link in the chat box if you want to go look at that.
And there were
slide we put up.
very
Oh, go ahead.
things, very final minor changes, but I just got back from Gus today, so just today I gave him the okay to post it. So I hope within the week that would be out listed where anyone could see it.
Great, thank you. Let's see. How would the bill deal with existing CCRs and HOAs? So those that already have covenants prohibiting ADUs.
Well, for HOAs, I'll need to hash that out with them and see what to do, right? HOAs are interesting because most of them, I mean, cities put ordinances in place where someone at least decides to put an ordinance in place. Most of the HOAs just have boilerplate language that no one in their organization has thought about at all that forbids it. They just have national boilerplate language and it just forbids it, and no one's even noticed it was there, but it just forbids it. So I'll need to work it out with them. The way it's written right now, it would just say that agreement is not binding, it's not legal, but I still need to talk with them and sort out how to make that balance.
Okay. Rod Mann said that some of the language on hardwiring for carbon monoxide is confusing. So Rod, maybe if you could email the legislator and ask him specifically about that. I know he's been working with some of the building code people on
Yes,
that. Let's see, is there a problem with unlawfully interfering with the right to contract? And I'm guessing that's going to the HOA question.
So it's just so weird to me that the argument would be to come in and say, we demand as an HOA the right to contract. And the only reason that we can forbid, so that we can forbid people the right to contract. That's the only reason we demand this right, is that we can forbid someone else the right to contract about their property. So, I mean, it just seems like an internal contradiction in what the HOA is even asking for, but that's what needs to get worked out.
Let's see, Jennifer McGrath said, I like the changes I see here. Does this include units built over above attached garages? How can we protect tenants of the ADU in circumstances when the original owner sells?
So the bill doesn't speak to that right now, and I guess I'm not sure if there's protections in place for a renter. I'm happy to think about that right now, but I don't think the bill changes whatever current law is in that respect.
And then she asked if it applies to over above attached garages, and I think your intention is yes.
It does with the language in the bill right now. If there's some reason to think about that differently, we can, but it kind of just says what's interior to the building that's already built is what an internal ADU is.
And then I see a few questions about parking. So how does the internal ADU affect existing parking restrictions? A follow-up is, why would you not allow a city to restrict ADUs based on the lack of parking?
Well, and I guess my question would be back would be, why should a family of 8 living in a home have a different permission than 4 people if 2 of them own the home and they rent to 2 who are living in their basement? It seems like if the owner's there, what the bill kind of does is say if the owner's there and living there with whoever's in their home, whether that be their niece and nephew and 4 other cousins, they're still responsible for following the same set of rules as if they choose to rent the basement to 2 people. Whatever those rules may be.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions. I'll do my best to get through a few more, and then we might have to send the rest to representatives.
Yeah.
What is the safety net for landlords, renters who default?
I'm sorry.
What is the safety net for landlords on renters who default? So I guess if the landlord defaults and you have someone in AD, what is the
bill does not speak to that. I don't think the bill makes any change to that. The landlord can evict a tenant, same as any other landlord can evict a tenant. What the bill does, the safety net that the bill puts in place is the bill goes to the bank and says, if the landlord is willing to rent to someone less than 80% area median income, which most ADUs already today are rented to, then the state will backstop the bank's loss if the landlord eventually doesn't pay and the bank can't collect, which we anticipate and hope would make the bank willing to loan the money at a lower interest rate.
Okay. How would you prevent these homes from becoming duplexes that are not owner occupied?
So the bill doesn't change anything about our current mechanisms of doing that. I am very happy to try and address that and take whatever input you would like to give me. So I do feel strongly that it needs to still be owner occupied. And if the league wants to get together and suggest a way that statutorily we could make that protection more strong, I don't have that in the bill right now, but I would invite that feedback from you to make that strong, because it is not my intention that this just turns into a duplex. My whole idea is that the owner living in the home does provide some check on just who they're willing to rent to, because it's their own home and their most valuable asset. And they'll take that into account without us mandating it when they rent to someone who's sharing their same living space. But let me know if there's other language that should make that more set and more trustworthy.
All right, let's do a couple more. Do I understand that cities are not being mandated to allow ADUs, but if they allow them, these items would be statewide law?
Correct. So in a zone where ADUs are permitted already, so we've already permitted ADUs, it would say that an external ADU, you could still, it wouldn't change anything about how the city wants to zone it. But it would say if it's a zone where you permit ADUs and this ADU is entirely internal, you can't even tell it's there from the outside, it's inside their home, then you can't, then it would mandate that you could not put those restrictions on it. You couldn't say, and I'll just give you some examples. There's cities that say you cannot have an ADU unless you have 80 feet of frontage on your lot. Well, that rules out all the cul-de-sacs. There's a city that says you cannot have an ADU unless it's less than 40% of the footprint of the house. Well, now you can't just have the basement because that's 50% of the footprint of the house. There's cities that says you cannot have an ADU unless it's less than 1,200 square feet. Okay, well, now if I have a 3,000 square foot and cut it in half, now I can't have it. So those restrictions, the city would not be able to make.
All right, and one more, and then I promise we will send all these questions to Representative Ward. Under the proposed statute, would it be possible to have more than one internal ADU in an existing home?
So the statute, that's a question that I have wondered about. The statute doesn't speak to that thing right now. And so I'm open to your input on that respect, right? So if that's something where we would say, well, we'd be okay with that. If it was clearly only limited to one, I'm very open to make that explicit. But right now, the statute does not speak to that.
Okay. There's quite a few more on parking. So I will just read this statement from Seth Parents and Spanish Fork. Our survey of residents stated their number one concern of ADUs had to do with on-premise versus off-street parking. In our survey, we learned that if we could require a specific parking space or two for the ADU, the concept was much more palatable to all residents. So there you go, Representative.
Sure, and I'm happy to think through all those. In the end, I think I would say we have been losing the battle for the last 20 years about housing affordability, and something has to happen about supply and demand. And to me, this is a way that we really need to focus on somehow, or I think we just continue to lose that battle. We can turn into Boston or Seattle or Los Angeles, or we can do something to make it easier to use our existing stock efficiently, and somewhere in here, hopefully we can find a common ground that works.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Ward, so much. So we're going to put up the poll questions. And again, Representative Ward's bill has other elements to it, like the HOA and the loan, but we are asking about two specific parts. So Carson, if you would put up on that first poll question, and this is about changing that definition of single family units. And then the second question is about the restrictions on what a city can regulate on the internal ADU. So if we could get members to fill those out quickly, we appreciate it. All right, a few more seconds. Then Carson, if you put up the results. All right, so on the first question about unrelated individuals, we've got 41% neutral, and then almost teetering on the teeter-totter on either side, a little bit more on the support side. So Representative, that should be helpful information to you that we're kind of a little bit of a split or a plurality on that one, but the majority, close to majority, are on the neutral side of that. And then on the second question about the restrictions, looks like we've got the majority of our members going towards the opposed or the strongly opposed. So this is really great for us to let Representative Ward know, and as we continue to work with him on this legislation. So Representative, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance.
Okay. All right, Madam Chair, that takes us to the next agenda item, which I believe is.
Next, we're going to turn to Cam, and yes, I am on Cam's laptop, and so he's here next to me, and I'm going to slide it over to him, and we're going to turn the time over here to Cam to talk to us about law enforcement. So.
Hello, everybody, and greetings again from our covert operation here at the Capitol. In a few minutes, for those who joined late, in a few minutes, Councilmember Mike Mendenhall, Mayor Ramsey, and I will be giving an award to Governor Herbert and paying tribute to his tremendous career as governor of the state of Utah and really his public service in general to our communities. Before we get to that, though, let's give you an update on the Love, Listen, Lead initiative here at the League and dialogue at the Capitol. well, better put, virtually at the Capitol about public safety. Carson, you can go ahead and advance the next slide. When we last met as a policy committee, it was the week of November interim. Later that week, Senator Iwamoto presented her law enforcement internal investigations bill, which we referenced at LPC that day, but we had not yet taken a position, and that's how we testified. Our task force met the day after interim to work on Senator Iwamoto's bill, because there are several pieces that were not yet in that bill that were crucial. The most important piece being ensuring that there's candid communication between agencies when an officer is looking to move from agency to agency and there's an open investigation into alleged officer misconduct. We're trying to find that space where you're protecting the due process of officers and ensuring that candid communication between chiefs and agencies during that hiring process. And we think that it also will result in improving the trust in the community around police officers too, if they know that that type of candid communication is occurring. The committee endorsed Senator Iwamoto's bill while also acknowledging, particularly from the League and the Chiefs of Police Association, that there was still work to be done on that bill. The task force sent back language and concepts to Senator Iwamoto. I discussed those with her last week, and those are in the process of being drafted, and hopefully we will have some language for the Loveless and Lee task force to consider the first week in January, so they can make a recommendation to bring back to LPC on January 11th. The Department of Public Safety is continuing to hold their big tent meetings, including a meeting this afternoon. And at this point, there are 78 bills that are open that deal with public safety in some form or fashion. Those bills really run the gamut on everything from mandating the use of body-worn cameras, regardless of the cost, to changing the way that we collect data at police agencies or enhancing training requirements. You'll see in the PowerPoint that I referenced that post-council will actually be considering in January some changes to basic training. And these changes have come out of the conversations that have occurred at the Department of Public Safety Big Tent meeting that Chief Ross and I have been attending on behalf of cities. The Utah Highway Patrol has also been working on some ongoing training that is in a pilot program status and that we will be looking at as well. We've also mentioned to you that Y2 Analytics has been doing a survey on community trust in police. We have hundreds of pages of data that are coming in. And what's interesting is they surveyed not just community members, but they also surveyed law enforcement officers at agencies around the state. We have over 200 law enforcement personnel who participated in this survey, and we're awaiting those final results so that we can finish the analysis and finalize the strategy for distribution in January as we prepare for the upcoming session. Are there any questions about where things are at? I'm looking at the chat, and there are plenty of questions about ADUs, and I want to thank all of you for your engagement and asking those questions, and to Representative Ward, if he's still here, for joining us to take those questions. On public safety, are there any questions about where we think things may be going and any of the big picture items that are on the docket in 2021? I'm looking in both the Q&A and the chat, and I'm not seeing anything yet at this point. In that case, stay tuned. Of those 78 bills, I would put some in the category right now as like bills that we could likely support. I would put many in that category as bills that we would likely oppose. And then I'd put the majority of them in the to be determined category because they are lacking language. So it's hard to read a bill that hasn't been written. So stay tuned. We'll have hopefully more information at the January LPC before things get going in a fast and furious pace on January 18th. Or January 19th, sorry, January 18th still a holiday, January 19th. Okay, Ramsey, I'm handing the computer back to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that update and everyone's efforts as part of the Loveless and Lee. Thank you so much. All right, fees, another hot topic. Wayne is going to talk to us about fees. Wayne, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Ramsey. We brought this issue up at the last LPC, and we're bringing it up again just so we make sure it's on your radar as you talk to your legislators and you get ready for the session. First, Carson brought up that there are going to be discussions about specific fees that you're collecting as a city. So specifically your building inspection fees and your building permit fees. And just so you know, we are working with the City Managers Association. They are starting to collect some data, and then the league will follow up with the survey as well. And we will be asking you about the fees that you collect, whether they cover the services that you're providing, produce more revenue than the services you're providing, and kind of how you determine those fees should be. I think the other category that we'll be looking at in this next legislative session, there is potentially going to be a bill that will talk about across governments how we determine the fee that we collect. And so this is something the auditor's office has looked at. They did a report on higher education, and then they've started to look at some specific fees in cities and towns. But we have talked with some legislators that they would like to have a process for any government that collects a fee on how you determine that fee and how you collect and when you review the level of that fee. And so we're just asking, as you talk to your legislators this before the session, that you're aware that fees are important to your city, that you have a process in place. And then as the session begins, we will probably be reaching out for specific data points. And we just hope that you'd be ready and responsive to those surveys, because we think there'll be a lot of discussions about fees this session. I can go ahead and just take the next one. We just want to bring you up to speed on a few other bills that we're going to see that we think are obviously they're friendly legislation, but we want you to be aware of them. So the first one is the Reserve Rainy Day Fund. As COVID started hitting and there were a number of legislative special sessions, one of the issues that we discussed was potentially increasing the caps of your reserve or rainy day funds. Representative Winter has a bill that we've seen draft language, and you can see that for a town, they increase your reserve to 100%. For cities, they go from 25 to 35%. And then they also do increases for your interlocal, as well as they increase the reserve accounts for counties. So again, this is just friendly legislation, but we want you to be aware that it will be moving forward this next session. And we also have a question, a rainy day poll question, Carson, if you want to throw that up. So how does your city town feel about legislation that increases the rainy day fund caps? If you could just fill that out very shortly. We know that during the special session, like we said, this was something that we discussed with the legislature about passing during the rainy day. And while we found some of a priority, it wasn't where we wanted to spend all of our political capital during those special sessions. So again, it's coming up in this next session. And if you want to complete that poll really quickly, we'll get the results.
Well, we're getting those results. Roger, I think you're here. We just had a question about the transportation utility fee and litigation and what might happen with that during session, if you want to chime in.
Well, I would say in some ways the discussion on fees in general has a bit of a tie to the transportation utility fee. We've taken the position based on a board response from the LPC in the past that we think that the litigation ought to go forward. It was only the first step of the district court. There were certain things that need to be clarified. We've also, it currently applies to a limited number of cities, but that doesn't change its importance. So we've taken that position. I think our biggest concern was that to stop any legislation that would legislatively kill the option of a transportation utility fee. At this junction, that's the position that's been conveyed. We don't know of any legislation to stop it. That doesn't mean it's not out there, but we're unaware of it. I think part of the discussion when Wayne mentioned the fee issue is there is a bit of a movement sponsored by Auditor Dougal and others to say that the legislature ought to statutorily define what constitutes a fee versus a tax, and the transportation utility fee issue falls into that. And I think the question there is, we as staff, and I think the board today recognizes that that's a legitimate item to discuss, but we don't think it ought to just be focused at cities. It ought to be focused at all levels of government. And of course, Auditor Google's was focused at higher education. So the transportation utility fee position is that needs to be litigated. We don't see, we're obviously opposing any efforts to statutorily take, quote, end it and take it away. I think we've got to be cognizant of the possibility of legislatively enacting it is probably not doable politically. So I think the issue is preserving it, and also to preserve that part of the discussion, the broader issue of fees, which we think is a pretty heavy lift to do in this session.
All right, thank you, Roger. And you saw the strong support there for that rainy day legislation, so that's helpful to us as we go on. All right, thanks, Wayne. Carson, if you'd go to the next. All right, this is an idea we've been hearing rumors about. The idea behind it is to help some of these convention and tourism businesses hurt by COVID. And so it would create a new type of assessment called the Convention and Tourism Business Assessment Area. And it would function somewhat like existing assessment areas. It would be created after 50% or more of the business owners would be subject to the assessment, sign a petition to create the assessment area. It would be all types of tourism businesses, and you can see the types there. And then the assessment would be levied to pay for festivals, promotional events, marketing, displays, signage, decorations. And again, the idea is to help get some of these businesses back to where they were before COVID hit. And so the details of this are still forthcoming, and I know that the devil is in the details, but we have a quick poll on this because we would like to hear from you if there is, support or opposition to this type of, again, it's a voluntary assessment area, but it would be facilitated by the city who have these types of businesses. So question is this funded by a sales tax? My understanding is it would be an assessment. So it's actually, yeah. And I'm not sure how they would calculate the assessment or do that. So I can't answer that for positive. And my other understanding about the counties, if I saw that question real quick, the counties be prohibited from just using the funding to pay the cost of their fairgrounds where the restaurant TRT taxes are used. And I don't have an answer to that. My understanding is that the counties would be able to do it, but they would need to work with the cities as they create these, but I don't have a specific answer about that. All right. Carson, if you just show the poll results there. Okay, so looks like about 52% neutral, but there's still some opposition. Oh, and some support there too. So as we get that bill out, we'll bring it back and inform all of you and get a better idea. But this is helpful guidance to us as we work with sponsors on this kind of concept. So appreciate it. All right, Carson, if you'd go to the next slide. And my understanding is that the governor might be ready earlier than we expected. So when we have to, we will just cut to him. All right, let's go on to roadmap on air quality in city. And Cam was going to cover this, but I think Cam is currently walking masked up the Capitol steps. So I will just go through it as best as I can. This is an idea that is coming from Representative Harrison. And, oh, Cam, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll still let you do it because we are walking up the stairs and I'm masked and it's snowing. So I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. This bill would encourage cities to voluntarily shift municipal fleets and other vehicles to green technology, and state fund with zero interest borrowing and or grants. So there would be a financing mechanism to help do this transition. And we've got some points up there from the Gardner Policy Institute roadmap on air quality and climate. And as you can see, number 1 is adopt emissions reduction goals and measure results. Number 2, convert fleets and adopt energy efficiency goals in public buildings. And some other goals to help with our air quality issues here in the Valley. So we just wanted to make you aware that this bill is potentially coming from Representative Harrison, and we'll have more details as the session goes on. All right, Carson, if you go to the next. All right, this bill was before the Public Utilities Interim Committee. It's Representative Handy, and you can see the bill language there. It's pretty sweet and short. I'll just read it for those of you who might not have up on your screen. But what this bill would do is that it says the municipality may not enact an ordinance, a resolution, or a policy that prohibits or has the effect of prohibiting the connection or reconnection of a utility service to a customer based upon the type or source of energy to be delivered to the customer. There have been a lot of questions about this bill, but we want to put up another poll to get just a general sense of how people are feeling about this particular piece of legislation for Representative Handy. So if you wouldn't mind responding there. So I see questions about what prompted this bill and if this preempts net metering. I don't have the answer about net metering. My understanding is there's some national effort with this kind of legislation that it's popping up in other states. And so it's now popped up in our state.
Victoria, let me add one comment here. The state constitution basically places the responsibility for utilities with cities. This is an issue that we think we don't know what problem he's trying to solve, or we've got an issue with any of our cities. I think the unintended consequences are an issue, but it does bring in to challenge the issue, whose role is it to make these decisions? So that's one of the questions.
Victoria, I think you're muted.
Thank you. So I'll just repeat what's on your screen, which is we're seeing opposition, and that feedback is very helpful. So we will take that back to Representative Handy. And as Roger said, we're trying to get more information from him about what his concern is and if there is another way to address it with this bill. So thank you everyone for filling that out.
You're muted again, Victoria.
I don't know why I'm doing that. All right, Cam was going to cover this, but I'm going to guess he's still waiting for the governor and walking up there. Cam, unless you want to chime in real fast on guns, Representative Malloy's bill.
No, we're getting the text set up with the governor, so I'll defer to you.
Okay, great. This is very exciting multitasking that we're doing here. So, Representative Malloy ran a bill last session, and we're expecting to see that bill back again this year. Just as a reminder, the legislature in previous years, past legislation has made it clear that it regulates the whole field of firearms unless it creates exceptions in state statute. And you can see some of those exceptions there. What the bill says is that a city may not enact a policy about transfer of firearms or public or private property on public or private property, that the city may not prohibit or require a permit for ammunition or firearm accessory. It voids any local ordinance or policy that violates the state preemption, And most concerning to us is the standing for anyone harmed by that city ordinance, that they can sue and collect actual damages, reasonable attorney fees, and interest. And part of that is a waive of the Governmental Immunity Act so that that suit can go forward. So again, we're expecting this from Representative Malloy. It has components to it that obviously encroach on our pillar of the role of local government, and so we will continue to be working on that. Carson, if you go on to the next slide. Emergency management, we have heard that Representative Harrison is looking at a bill that would require political subdivisions to designate an emergency manager and have interim emergency successors, and that you as the city would also have to create an emergency operations plan, and then also put some requirements on the counties to set up notification plans. And so we have a poll question about this just to get a general sense of how people feel about this bill. If it's something you're already doing, so no big deal, or if you see this as an onerous mandate by the state. If Carson, you could put that polling question up, you can kind of get a sense of where people are on that. All right, Carson, if you want to show us the results. And to Jennifer's question, I am not aware of an appropriation request with this bill. That doesn't mean there might not be one, but I'm not aware of one. Okay, it looks like we've got 43% support, but 24% oppose. And we've got some neutral in the middle there. So, okay, that's very helpful for us. Thank you, everyone. All right, Carson, moving on. I'm just going to keep going through these bills till the governor signs on with us. Legal notice. The Deseret News and the Tribune recently announced that they're moving to weekly print publication. Many of you know there are several provisions in state law that require printed legal notice. There are already many publications in the state that are already weekly, but obviously these are the two big ones. We've reached out to the Utah Media Coalition because we have heard that some of you are concerned about being able to comply with statute with this change. But the Media Coalition has indicated it's opposed to any change in statute. So Carson, we've got another polling question there, and we just want to get a sense of the concern about this going forward and your ability as a city to comply with notice publication. All right, Carson, go ahead and see those results there. So okay, great, thank you. So we've got 47% are somewhat concerned and 19% not concerned, and then 34% very concerned. Okay, so that helps let us know that you know, we've got some issues we've got to tackle there. Okay. And yeah, I see a note from Zach Jacob that this needs to be brought in the 21st century. As the legislative drafter who used to have to draft these bills, then the issue always comes back to the Media Coalition and the revenues that are garnered from that. All right, Carson, if you could send us the next slide, unless Cam wants to interrupt me with the governor. Okay, Nick Dirksen and Benj Becker are here to talk about Community Reinvestment Agency amendments. And Nick and Benj, I will apologize right now. The plan was not for you to be preempted by the governor, but that might happen. Just as a reminder, they came to us a few months ago. This is a concept that Senator Harper brought last session, and they have a white paper in the packet of materials we sent out to you. And we'd love for you to take a look at it and give them feedback. Cam, unless you're going to jump in, Carson, let's let Nick and Benj take the floor.
Oh, just real quick here. So I don't want to take a lot of time. As Victoria talked about, this is a bill that you're familiar with before. And rather than going through all those, the white paper that Benj Becker put together that's in your supplemental materials is very detailed, should provide a huge amount of information that maybe heretofore you hadn't have. But we thought the best use of this time would be to have Benj take you through an actual example of this. And remember, this is an optional thing. It doesn't replace CRAs or in place of anything. It's an option that would be out there for both to an ongoing localized economic development funding mechanism. And we thought maybe the best thing for most of the elected officials would be to take an example of a city that would go through this process and how it would happen. So Benj is going to take us through that, and he's on here, I see him now, and I'll have him take you through that process. Thanks, Benj.
Thanks, Nick. And I'd love to be interrupted by the governor, so obviously jump right in. SB 163, this white paper, again, as Nick said, really highlights it's a neutral position, of course, being a white paper, and highlights some potential advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at a potential example here of a CRA RDA that is soon to be sunsetting, that's generating, let's say, $10 million. And of that 10 million, maybe 5 million is is related to the school district, 2 million to the county, 2 million to the city, and the remaining million to the other taxing entities. This option, again, this is an option, this is a potential enhancement to existing CRAs, would allow an agency and certain taxing entities to enter into an interlocal agreement for the purpose of transferring project area incremental revenue. So at that time, if the taxing entities decided that they wanted to exercise this option, the school district hypothetically could say, of our 5 million, maybe 2 million of this will be transferred. And the county could say of their 2 million, maybe 1 million, and the city could say, 1 million of their 2 million. That could create $4 million in this essential incremental revenue. That would then be converted to a tax rate. At that point, that allows the agency to be able to use that new revenue source in perpetuity all throughout agency-wide. So no longer just limiting those funds to specific project areas, but to be able to use those agency-wide. It also severely limits an agency's ability to create new CRAs, and thus helping the taxing entities to be ultimately less involved with the creation and implementation of all of these different CRAs, but still essentially participating in terms of helping communities grow. There is no certainly requirement for the taxing entities via an interlocal agreement to continue to participate. At the end of the existing CRA, they may take the bump that occurs and be done with the CRA. The agency at that time, just from city-related funds, could create the taxing entity and go forward with those funds in perpetuity. Some potential benefits to this, in this example, would allow an agency, again, to use money agency-wide, maybe a more collaborative, comprehensive planning effort that doesn't just focus economic development on specific project areas, but understands the more holistic and city-wide approach. It could also help to keep areas from declining. So instead of specifically, seeing an area that's in decline and having to create a CRA, maybe for a smaller area, it allows for funds to be used to help keep areas propped up and economically developing and being vital. It's a tool or an option that could be used to help small businesses to really pick specific areas of the city where you see that increment could be helpful, or this new tax source could be helpful in order to generate new business. That's the quick sort of 4-minute overview. The white paper, if you haven't looked at it, it will show you the current structure as opposed to the proposed structure if that option is enacted. Understand what happens to those base values, what happens to that new growth, how that is established, lets you understand a little bit some of the abilities of the taxing entity, and then also just shares some potential advantages and disadvantages. There you go.
All right, thank you, Benj and Nick. Give 1 minute for questions. Any questions you want to put in the chat box? Otherwise, in the supplemental materials, the white paper has both of their emails, and we encourage all of you to reach out to them and give them those questions or concerns that you have. All right, I am not seeing any questions in the chat, so thank you so much, Nick and Benj. We really appreciate it. And again, everyone, please reach out to them with your concerns or additional questions. All right, I am not seeing, oh.
Victoria, we are getting close. So hang in there and just give us a couple more minutes.
Okay. All right. Carson, if you put the slides back up, I will just keep, yes, others can access the white paper, and then I'll ask Carson to put the link up to the materials again so you can get to it. But, asking Carson to do a lot of things today, so I really appreciate it. I think next on our list, let's see, one more, yeah, county, whoops, it's there for a second. Next one is, we just want to inform everyone that the counties are proposing to create a new levy to allow them to collect revenues for animal control services. And again, this would be a county levy, but we wanted to inform everyone of that effort and ask you to, if you have any concerns, to reach out to us. And you can see Roger's email there on the screen. There would also be a first-year offset requirement if the county imposed this tax. So if you have any questions or concerns about this, please reach out to Roger. All right, next, Carson, if you go to the next slide. Land Use Task Force, I'm going to go through these really quick because not a lot has changed since we last presented these to you, but we've gotten to a little bit more consensus since then. Again, there will be legislation requiring annual training for planning commissioners. Impact fees, this is really just a clarification as to what impact fees can be used for to pay for facility plans and analysis. Conditional use permits, we will be inserting the word objective next to standards in the CUP statute. Nick, or sorry, Carson, if you would go to the next slide. Annexation Incorporation, again, this is dealing with cross-county annexations. There will be a process where a property owner has to first look to the cities closest to it and see if the property is in their annexation plans. And if not, then can look across the county border to being annexed by a city across the county boundary. But there will be that external county's participation in that process. And if you want more details about that, I'd be happy to talk to you. And other changes will change the annexation and incorporation notification, trying to get more people notice in this process. And then for incorporation, there will be a second opt-out to let landowners who don't want to be incorporated have a second attempt to get out of the incorporation. Carson, if you go to the next slide. Low impact development, the consensus that would reach this week was that this bill would establish the maximum pavement width at 32 feet. This was a compromise number. The developers wanted less, we wanted more. So that's where that is. Boundary line adjustments, we're still trying to work on language to clarify the confusion between boundary line agreements and boundary adjustments. The water providers will have legislation clarifying that they're part of the plat approval process. Development agreements, this is coming from the recent court cases on contract zoning. The bill defines development agreements and when they may be used. And then building permits investing, there's been some confusion about when in the process is a land use or is it building permit, and where the land use vesting process is triggered, and that is not triggered by a building permit. So we're still working on that language, but we think we're pretty much a consensus. Carson, if you go to the next slide. What is a no-go is standards of review. We were not willing to compromise of what they were asking for in standards of review, and that has not changed. We're not expecting legislation on that. And then PIDs, we also pushed back on proposals to take local government out of the public infrastructure district creation process. And we have since been told by the PRC that they will not be running a PID bill this year due to our opposition, but they still want to continue to look at PIDs in the process. Well, outstanding issue in land use is gravel pits. The PRC has indicated that we can't reach consensus this year. However, we are still talking about next steps and strategizing for this session. So gravel pits is still an issue that's on the table, and we're looking at how to proceed forward. Carson, if you go to the next slide. Cam, I don't know if you're ready. Otherwise, I will just keep going.
Keep going. I will cut you off when necessary.
Great. Perfect. All right, outreach. As we mentioned earlier, we are going to just keep giving you all the homework to contact your legislators, because we are really going to need the help this session. I've put some frequently asked questions up there. If you haven't ever talked to your legislator, I hope this is helpful to you. And I won't go through all of these, but I do want to point out that you can just directly contact them. They do not have staff that are vetting for them other than the president and the speaker. So just reach out. It happens all the time to legislators. When we send out our text alerts, we hope that you will jump on those quickly, because session really does move quite fast. And we promise we will not pepper your phone with unnecessary text, but we would really appreciate your help when we send out those alerts on hot bills. And if a legislator is not in your district, we've got the League Army here, and we will help you get in contact with a city official who lives in that district, or feel free to reach out to them yourself and coordinate talking to that legislator. Again, we really need everybody's help. And Cam, Carson, if you'd click on that, Cam is identifying this as the League Cyber Army this year. And so we're calling out the cyborgs to help us with advocacy on the Hill in this weird virtual world that we are in. Carson, if you'd go to the next slide. In your packet of materials, we've listed the key committees, and you can see them here. We've highlighted the chairs and vice chairs in the House. We want you to know that political subdivisions, that's a key committee for us. 7 out of the 10 members are new, and 5 of them are freshmen. So we really need your help reaching out to them and the rest of these committees. Government operations has also a lot of bills that impact cities, and that's going to be a tough committee for us. So the better you can build those relationships with those legislators, the easier it is for us to help you deal with some of these bills. Carson, if you go to the next one, this is the Senate committees. Again, please reach out to these legislators, build these relationships before we get into session. And you can see these assignments in your packet. All right, Carson, if you go to the next slide. And I'm going to ask Seth Parents in Spanish Fork to share his experience talking to his legislators. But if you don't know who your legislator is, this is how you can find it. Go to the legislative website.
Hey, Victoria,
oh,
Victoria, I'm
go
going
ahead.
to cut you off. So you go to the slide at the pictures, and will you turn the video on, and we'll be. Good. Victoria and everybody, while we're waiting, you can see some fantastic videos or photos of Governor Herbert through the years at league events. So thank you, Governor, for joining us at league events throughout my career. These are some of the highlights, including on my 1-year-old daughter's first birthday. So thank you for joining us. Local Officials Day was her first birthday. So thank you, Governor. So Victoria, just give us 1 second. We're waiting for their video feed.
I need that house. There we go. You guys saw me?
Okay.
Yep. Perfect.
Great.
Let me tell you the story.
Okay. Brother Mauer's here, so we're ready.
It's awesome.
Mayor, how are you?
Right. So good. How are you, Governor?
Good, thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. It is a privilege for me to get to be here with you today and for each of us to get to be here. And the 140 people that we have on this Zoom meeting
Wow.
from across the state, elected officials at the local level from across the state, to say thank you. Thank you for your years of service. I want to give a little bit of background to some of the members on the call that you already know this, but just a little bit of a highlight, if I may. Governor Gary R. Herbert is the longest serving governor in the United States, is that right?
That's true.
That's
I can
true.
call me the Dean of Government.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, you were an outstanding president of the National Governors Association. When I had the privilege of participating in that event last year, when it was held here in Salt Lake, I had several people approach me and say, you have the best governor. Oh, Gary's great. Oh, he's so great. And they didn't have to do that. They wanted to make sure that I knew.
Wife, I
Yeah. No, although I love your wife.
You know,
It
we're
wasn't
the
her.
only state that's ever hosted it twice under one governor's term. So that's never happened before.
What a privilege. It was on Pioneer Day, 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. I share that because I want people to know that your leadership has extended beyond our state and really has included the entire country. Governor Herbert was elected lieutenant governor in 2004 and became governor in 2009 and has since been reelected 3 times. It's amazing and impressive. Impressive.
It is kind of amazing.
It's impressive. One thing that I personally and the rest of us really do love about you is that you always refer to yourself as a local government guy. You're a local government guy, came from serving on the Utah County Commission, right?
That's true.
And
14 years.
14 years. You served as chair of the commission.
Many times.
Several times.
And the Association of Governments and the regional governments too. So I've been involved since 1990.
You know, it's hard to take a look at the success that our state has experienced without seeing your fingerprints all over it. I mean, you really helped get us through the Great Recession, this global pandemic. Could you have ever even imagined some of these things that you've experienced?
No. No. I keep hoping I wake up.
Right.
2020.
Right. Well, maybe it's best that we don't know what kind of things are in the future,
That's probably
right?
true.
Right. Well, your leadership has helped the state grow to the strongest economy and the most diversified economy in the nation, which is helping us recover from this pandemic better than a lot of our neighbors and peers in other states. Thank you. We truly, truly appreciate that. We want to say thank you for the time that you've dedicated to representing yourself and your office with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. You've always made time to come and participate, to be at our Local Officials Day, and to express your support of our organization, especially during some restructuring the last few years. And we hope you know how much it means to us to have your confidence in the good people who are working as local elected officials in this state.
We hope you'll accept something that we brought for you, Governor. I'll just tell you out front, you don't have to bring this with you to Spanish Fork to get inside City Hall or inside our rodeo. You're welcome to the rodeo for the rest of your obviously retired years. You and the First Lady.
Thank
so
you.
Please come down. You don't need to bring this,
Yeah.
but we do appreciate so much your representation of local government, all 249 cities across the state. You've led by example, by hard work, by ethical leadership, and you and your staff have been nothing short of amazing for us to work with as local government, all the way from Spanish Fork to South Jordan and everywhere across the state. So thank you so much, Governor Herbert, for your service, and we appreciate the sacrifice of you and your family in that tenure.
Well, thank you. That'll fit right in my new keychain. I have to buy a car. I haven't owned a car for 16 years. And so this could be a change. I went out and looked at some cars over the weekend. I thought mine's gonna take me a week just to learn what all the buttons and all the things are in the cars to do. So anyway, thank you for that key to the state, the cities of the state. I appreciate that's very nice. I mean, thank you very much.
Well, we're here representing all 1,300 plus local elected officials to say thank you. We truly appreciate your service, and in behalf of the more than 3 million people across the state that we represent and that you represent, thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm a little bit speechless here to know what to say. Can I say a few things? Would that be okay to the group out there?
Yes.
I won't bore you with a long speech. I'll try to bore you with a short speech. But I do feel very humbled about this recognition. And I'm humbled because we all have worked together very hard, working together to make local government have its prominent role that it deserves. As I've said many times, local government is where the rubber meets the road. Most of the government services that we feel and have at our homes come from local governments, the cities or the counties. State has a role to play, but we empower you to do most of the work. You are where the rubber meets the road. So I appreciate the role that the Utah League of Cities and Towns plays as an association to be the voice for local government. And I feel very hopeful about the future because of local government people like yourself, your mayors, your council people, the role you play and how well you do it. And so I appreciate that. I'll just mention this recognition. I'm happy to accept the recognition. I don't know that I deserve it. But then I have arthritis in my left knee and I don't know that I deserve that either. So, but I'm smart enough to know how significantly important it is for all of us to work together. We call it teamwork. And some of you know I played sports when I was back in high school. I played quarterback on my Orem High School football team. And although that's an important role as quarterback, the success I had was dependent upon many other people. And mine was the simple thing of just throwing the ball to somebody or handing it off. But if I didn't have a line that blocked appropriately, I had no time to pass, I'd be sacked. They didn't open up holes for the people I handed the ball off to, the running backs. They were not going to go anywhere. If I didn't have wide receivers that could catch the ball, maybe some of my errant throws made the catch anyway. The defensive team that keeps the other team off the field, and the coaches, the cheerleaders, the fans, all of you working together makes for a successful football team. So that's a poor analogy, but it is one that works. And that is that in our administration, we've talked about team, TEAM. That's the acronym for team. And I do believe this is a principle that together, T, everyone, E, achieves A, more, M. Together, everyone achieves more, team. And that's a concept that I think that we in local government understand as well as anywhere in government. So thank you for the work you've done. I appreciate, I've got Mike Maurer here, who's been our liaison with local governments, and you all know Mike. I think he's going to continue on in this role to the next administration. So that'll make it the cohesiveness that we need to have and the transition smooth. Let me just mention a couple of things too. And I know this is true about our cities and our counties and certainly our state. We're one of only 9 states in America, only one of 9 that have a AAA bond rating from the rating agencies on Wall Street. And you think about that for a little bit and you think, why? Why would not other states, other communities, localities say, we probably ought not to spend more money than we take in. We probably ought to have rational debt, not unreasonable, we become debt heavy. We ought to probably have taxes that are competitive and allow the people and the businesses to keep more of their hard-earned money to reinvest in their people and in product. We ought to have regulation reform that when I get around the country, I can tell the most common complaint is not about the taxes, interestingly enough. It's about regulations that get in the way, particularly federal regulations. And as a state, when I came into office, as you all know, in 2009, we were at the depths of the Great Recession, the worst economic times in the history of our state since the Great Depression. Now, we could have done like other states and said, well, let's raise taxes, let's cut services. And we didn't. We said, you know what we're going to do, in fact, is double down on the fact we're going to empower the private sector. We cut taxes. We have the lowest tax obligation today in Utah. We as citizens, we've had in Utah in 17 years, the lowest tax obligation. That's something we can all say, hey, isn't that great? We're managing the taxpayers' dollars as a sacred trust, and we're doing a pretty good job of it. We actually have increased efficiency in government. We have fewer state employees today we had back in 2002. And that's in the face of 800,000 more people calling Utah home in that same period of time. So we're doing more with less people. Government doesn't make anything. We just provide services and create regulations. So on balance, we have found that was a better formula than other states took. And that's why we went from the depths of the Great Recession to, as the mayor said, the healthiest, most diverse economy in America. I mean, that's quite remarkable. What does that produce? We see a lot of small businesses becoming large businesses. We've become the epicenter for many the epicenter of small business. You can't become a large business unless you're first a small business. You've got to have an incubator, which allows the entrepreneur to say, I'm going to risk my capital. I'm going to put my time. I'll work extra hours on the off chance I make a profit. That's a wonderful system called free market capitalism. And we've perfected that. And what that's done now too is not only we have this most diverse, healthy economy, at the 1st of March of this year, we had a record of 2.3% unemployment rate, the lowest in our state's history. The Ken Garner Institute said the best decade in Utah's history have been the last years until the pandemic hit. We're going to get through that. I'll mention that in closing. But it's been a remarkable run that we've had. And what we've done is lift more people out of poverty. We have the lowest poverty rate of about any state in America today now because of that. We have the largest middle class, broad middle class. You can talk to Forbes magazine, Bloomberg, Newsweek magazine, talking about the remarkable middle class, how large it is in the state of Utah. And we still have the American dream alive and well. Upward mobility is the best in Utah of any state in America. Mayor Bloomberg actually had me come back and talk. He said, I want to know why Utah is doing so great. We had a conversation about that, but they did an analysis of our state and said that if you're on the lowest rung of the ladder and you want to get to the highest rung of the ladder, your odds, they can calculate, and they did it in all the states, and Utah is number one. The odds are about 1 in 10. You go from the lowest rung to the highest rung of the ladder. So your odds are pretty good to advance economically. If you apply yourself, there's opportunity. And that's something we ought to be very proud about and maintain. It's the largest middle class, upward mobility, people living the American dream. So that's what we've done because we just stayed true to the basics. Don't spend more than you take in, don't have irrational debt, make sure we have competitive tax rates, regulation reform, empower the private sector in a free market competitive system, and there's no limit to what we can accomplish. And by the way, that's why right now, in spite of the pandemic, we are projected to be the best state to come out of this economic downturn. We're already back down to 4.1% unemployment rate. The national average is about 8, so it's almost double what we are in Utah. We do know that there are some areas like hospitality. I feel bad for those areas. We've had some areas that have been hit harder because of this unique pandemic that we've had, which is I guess a 100-year event. Nobody in our lifetime's ever seen it before, but Spanish flu back in 1919, as close as you come to it. So again, we have the ability, because we've stayed true to those principles, which I know that the league's doing, to come out of this. I mean, you're on the front lines. The business is going to be in your backyards. The opportunity for people. We need to make sure they have educational opportunities, a good, strong labor force that's got the skills necessary to line up with the demands of the marketplace. If that happens and we continue to do that, 2021 is going to be the turnaround time. We're already, we got the vaccines today. We were on the phone with the vice president today. Everybody's excited. This is really kind of a red letter day. This is really the beginning of the end, is what they say. And I believe that's true, at least on the pandemic. But we're poised. By the way, we've done better than most states because we are prepared. You know, we had a rainy day fund. We hadn't overextended ourselves. So when the calamity happened, and this happened to be the pandemic, we were ready. We were able to weather the storm. We don't need a lot of bailout like some of the states have done. So again, that's a tribute to the state, to our legislature, to you and local government, which are really, like I say, on the front lines where the rubber meets the road. So it's a collective effort. And what do we say? Team, together, everyone achieves more. So let's continue. Again, it'll be a new sheriff in town, so to speak, with the Spencer Cox coming on board. But I think you'll see a continuation of what we've been doing the last 10 years, the foundation we built, he's going to build upon and raise the bar even higher. I know you mayors and council people do the same thing. So again, the outlook for Utah is very bright, very good. I'm very optimistic. If I was your stockbroker and Utah was a stock, I would say buy, because it's going to go nothing but up. Thank you very much for the honor. It's very nice of you.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay, now I've got to get to another.
Yes, can we get, really quick, everyone, we just want to get a quick photo with them here. Everybody's got their next representative. This is one of the coolest awards the governor's ever received. So I want to make
That
sure.
is true.
Awesome.
We just delete.
Nope. Somewhere.
Okay.
So Victoria, we are stepping off of the LPC call so we can do a photo with the governor. So to all of the attendees, happy holidays. We'll see you next year, and thanks for your engagement with the league. Victoria and Councilmember Malkovich will let you take it to the finish line.
Then I'll jump out of the way and we'll get the real photo here with Brooke.
Okay. Thank you, Carson. Or sorry, thank you, Cameron. I'm going to hand it over to Seth's parents. We've just got a few more items.
All right.
But Seth has reached out to their legislators, and I just wanted him to share real quickly the conversation that they had with their legislators and how they went about it. So Seth, I'm going to hand over to you in Spanish Fork.
Thanks, Victoria. What we did in Spanish Fork isn't really all that special, and as I describe it, you might feel like it was a train wreck in how it ended up. However, when all things were said and done, we had a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful experience here last week. We've tried over the years to have a few different reach outs to our legislators, and we've met with mixed success. And so this last month, we, after our last LPC, decided that we would try to have a work session, have some dinner before a council meeting, and have a discussion where we could create relationships again with our legislators and create a relationship specifically with a newly elected legislator. And we had everybody invited, and most everybody was accepted. And then when it comes to Tuesday night, only one showed up. And it was really tough because we'd hoped for something different and maybe something greater. But it was our brand new legislator that was newly elected, and he was there, and we had about a 45-minute one-on-one, if you will. It was really one on about 15 conversation with Representative Jefferson Burton. And he was very gracious in the time and the dialogue that we had. He gave a cell phone number to everybody in the room, took about 6 or 8 different cell numbers from different elected officials and staff members. And then we took the opportunity to present different staff members at different departments as subject matter experts. And we invited him to put names with faces of, if you have a bill about public works related items, Chris Thompson, our public works director, is somebody that you can turn to and get some understanding of utility related bills or development related bills. And our economic development director, Dave Anderson, as he spoke, if you have housing questions, he can really give you great insights from a city perspective. And names and faces and phone numbers was very, very welcomed by him and wonderful for all of us. And then maybe moving forward, we had one of our representatives that didn't come to this work session showed up at council meeting. And he had something that precluded him from being there during our meeting. And so he he was there kind of in the back of the room, and astute council members and mayors noticed that he was there and didn't let him go unnoticed. And so they took a moment to recognize the representative that was in the room and then have him come up to the microphone. And I think he spent about 10 minutes at the mic, having some fun dialogue as well as some discussions about other things. But we learned in those meetings, each of these individuals, how they felt about law enforcement and some of the bills that we're going to see, how these two individuals feel and their support of what is going on. Even Representative Gibson, we got some good quotes from Representative Gibson about local leaders and their role is best. And even the league got a little bit of love from Representative Gibson in that meeting. So it was all, in the end, quite positive. It didn't play out how we planned or maybe how we hoped, but in the end, frankly, I think it was probably one of the best interactions that we've had about this topic, if you will, with our legislators before. So really just trying created some success, I think, for us this year. I think that's all I have, Victoria, unless you want to watch the video. No.
It is a great video, and it's on their Facebook page, and we will hold Representative Gibson to those kiddos in the league. So thank you, Seth. I really appreciate it. And I want Seth to share this so you can have an idea of how some of the conversations are happening in those cities who've reached out to their legislators. And I really love the idea of giving them phone numbers of city staff who are experts so they can just reach out immediately when they see bills and ask them questions. So thank you, Seth. Carson, if you put the slides up, we're going to wrap up really quick. When there's a slide on the federal stimulus, do you want to just give us a real brief update on that?
Yeah, so as part of your outreach, the federal delegation this week will be considering potential fourth stimulus. And it appears right now that there will be a package of $750 billion that will include things like vaccine distribution and paycheck protection. They will consider in a separate package $160 billion for local governments. And you can see on the slide there on the right-hand side, we've got some information on how it will be distributed. But we're encouraging you to contact the federal delegation this week to discuss the need for additional funding for state and local governments. At the bottom of the page there's a link to the NLC. They have Cities Are Essential campaign that has a lot of information, but you can also contact me as well if you have questions about that package or how you can contact a member of the delegation. And so feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Wayne. All right, that leaves us to our homework for you and to wrap up. And I know we've gone long, so I really appreciate everyone staying with us. Number one homework is to reach out to your legislators, talk to them, get phone numbers, get emails, help them understand the role of local government, what's happening in your city, give them the names of those staff members who can be experts for them to reach out to, and help us with our advocacy in this bizarre 2021 session. Your next piece of homework is on housing. We want you to contact us if you have any feedback on HRZs or ADUs. We will forward those questions from Representative Ward's discussion to him. Any feedback on fees, please also send to Wayne. And talk to your legislators about housing. There's a lot of misunderstanding by legislators about cities' roles, what levers we have to pull in affordable housing, what we don't, and the impacts of taking away that local decision in housing. And then number three, make sure your LPC membership is current on our roster. You can go to our webpage there. This link is also in the packet, in the presentation link that Carson sent out. And we will have a sign up next time to get your mobile numbers for text alerts. And so that basically wraps us up. We're really grateful for all of you and everything you do. Please reach out to us. We will be following up with you about your contact with your legislators. And there's the calendar for the future LPC meetings. During session, they will be at noon. Again, they will all be virtual. So we will continue to play with this format, and we hope to have better tools there to help you participate and vote when we get the bills out. So everyone have a great holiday. Thank you for staying with us. We appreciate you recognizing the governor, and we appreciate all the hard work that you're doing. So we thank you so much. And I think Mayor Ramsey is gone, so I'm going to turn to you, Chair Malkovich, to wrap us up.
All right. It's been a good meeting. It's been a long meeting. So those of you who stayed on to the end, thank you so much. I think it was nice for us to take that little extra time to recognize the governor and all the work that he and his staff have done to help us as local leaders. With that, then we'll cut this short and we will see you on January 11th. Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.